A very good afternoon to you all. In contrast to the basic tenet of ex vivo and in vivo gene therapies, we have the antisense therapy, and this therapy is designed to prevent or at least lower the expression of a specific gene. Now, this antisense therapy entails the introduction into a target cell of a nucleic acid sequence that is complementary to all or a portion of a specific mRNA. Now, after the two RNA sequences, that is an endogenous mRNA and the exogenous antisense RNA hybridize, the amount of mRNA that is available for the process of translation is reduced. So, once you observe the hybridization between the endogenous mRNA and the exogenous antisense RNA, then the amount of mRNA that is available for the translation is reduced. So, consequently, a smaller amount of the target protein is synthesized. So, it is also possible that an antisense sequence will hybridize to the complementary gene sequence, thereby blocking transcription of the target mRNA. So, what happens? The outcome is, in either case, the production of a specific protein is reduced within a particular cell type. Where do the antisense therapy play a significant role? In some types of human genetic diseases and cancers, so the genes can be either overexpressed or deregulated. If they are overexpressed, with the consequence that either too much of gene product is produced or its continual presence changes the normal functioning of the cell. So, in these cases, because the disease state is not due to a faulty gene product, but it is due to too much of the production of the gene product. So, protocols that are designed to provide a functional gene would be ineffective. So, you need not have to deliver a functional gene in such cases, because the gene is functional, but it is over expressive. So, consequence is too much of gene product is observed. So, in such cases, since the disease state is not due to a faulty gene product, protocols that are designed to provide a functional gene, as in the case of ex vivo and in vivo gene therapy, this would be ineffective. However, defective regulation might be overcome by limiting the amount of translation of the protein from the overproducing gene. So, in this context, antisense therapy, which has been used more often to discover the function of a specific gene products by blocking their synthesis. Originally, the technology was to study the function of a specific gene product by using the strategy of blocking the synthesis of the gene product. So, this can theoretically be used in the following two ways as shown in the figure, that is figure A and figure B. If you carefully go through the figure, these are the two strategies using antisense therapy for inhibition of a specific mRNA. In figure A, the antisense oligonucleotide strategy, that means this strategy is called as, or it is referred to as, antisense oligonucleotide strategy. In this strategy, an oligonucleotide that has an antisense sequence to a region of a target mRNA is introduced into a cell. Here, an oligonucleotide that has an antisense sequence to a region of a target mRNA is introduced into a cell. By base pairing to the target mRNA, thus it prevents the translation of the particular mRNA. So you can see you have the mRNA on one side and the antisense oligonucleotide on the other side in figure A. And after base pairing, because they are complementary, since it is an antisense oligonucleotide, this prevents the translation of the mRNA. And in figure B, this strategy is referred to as antisense gene strategy. So the two strategies, that is number one, antisense oligonucleotide strategy, and number two, antisense gene strategy. In antisense gene strategy, an expressible gene that is cloned in its reverse orientation that is introduced into a cell, and the RNA that is transcribed from this construct is the antisense sequence to the normal mRNA. So whatever the RNA you get from this reverse oriented gene construct will be the antisense sequence to the normal mRNA. So when the antisense RNA base pairs with the mRNA, there will be no translation of the mRNA. For the reason that this antisense RNA does not contain signal for the initiation of the translation. So these are the two important strategies. So in the first strategy, the target cells can be treated with a set of oligonucleotides that contain antisense sequences to the mRNA of a deregulated gene, and this protocol requires that the oligonucleotides be administered at regular intervals over a period of time, right? The effectiveness of the antisense sequences differed for various sections of the mRNA. With the second approach, the cells are transfected with a vector that carries the cloned sequence oriented so that its transcript is antisense RNA rather than mRNA. So in this case, to be more effective, high levels of the antisense sequence might need to be present in the cell to lower the translational potential of the affected cell, right? So essentially, the antisense therapy is designed to prevent or at least lower the expression of a gene that causes a disease condition wherein the replacement with a normal gene would be ineffective. In such diseases or a state of diseases, the antisense therapy play a role in preventing or at least lowering the expression of the overexpressed gene product. So this is about the gene therapy, the three approaches, the ex vivo, the in vivo, and wherein for the overexpressive genes, the antisense therapy is available. So moving further, we have the development and use of transgenic animals. So in the curriculum we have for both transgenic animals and plants. To begin with, I'll take up the concepts of the development and use of transgenic animals. As a prelude, many generations of selective matings are required to improve the livestock. So it takes several generations to reach the best livestock. It could be for the milk yield, the wool characteristics, or the weight gain, or even the egg laying frequency. These are some of the traits that are or that has impact, or it forms a basis for development of an improved livestock, and it is dependent on several factors and it carries for many generations. At each successive generation, animals with superior performance characteristics are used as breeding stock. Though it runs for several generations, at each successive generation, whichever the trait you are looking for, if the animals with superior performance traits or characteristics are observed, then they are used as breeding stock. So eventually high production animals are developed as more or less pure breeding lines. Though the combination of mating and selection, although it is time consuming and costly, but this method is exceptionally successful. Right. Today, almost all species which or on which this strategy, that is mating and selection for the improved livestock, have been carried out, they are attributed to this process, and once the effective genetic line has been established, it becomes difficult to introduce new genetic traits by selective breeding methods. So in this case, a completely new program of generational crosses with rigorous selection procedures has to be initiated to ensure that a new breeding line retains both its original attributes as well as the new characteristic or the trait. Right. Consequently, the strategy that has been used to achieve this is very simple. First, a cloned gene is injected into the nucleus of a fertilized egg, and then the inoculated fertilized eggs are implanted into a receptive female, for the reason that successful completion of mammalian embryonic development is not possible outside of a female. And the third one is some of the offsprings derived from the implanted eggs carry the cloned gene in all of their cells, and animals with the cloned gene integrated in their germline cells, they are bred to establish new genetic lines. Say for example, if the product of the injected gene stimulates growth, it means if you are injecting with respect to stimulation of the growth of an animal, then the animals that acquire this gene should grow faster and they should require less feed. So you are injecting a gene for growth of an animal. That means the outcome is the animals that take up this gene should grow faster with less feed requirement. So this is essentially what the technology is all about. This is the theoretical approach, right? The genetic improvement of multicellular organisms by the introduction of relevant transgenes is gaining a lot of importance. Nowadays, the transgenesis has become a powerful technique for studying the fundamental problems of the mammalian gene expression and development. So it is not only about improving the livestock, which was the objective in the early development of the technology. Nowadays, you see the use of this transgenesis, that is creating a transgenic animal, has become a powerful tool or the technique for studying the fundamental problems of mammalian gene expression and development. So using the transgenic models, animal models, you can study the fate of the mammalian gene expression and development, otherwise which was not possible. So from the traditional objective of development of a transgenic animal, now we have moved on to using such transgenic animal models to study the development of the mammalian gene expression. In turn, this would have a consequence for development of the therapeutic approaches. So the transgenic technology has been developed and perfected very well with the use of laboratory mouse. Right? This is a typical example for production of transgenic mice with the retroviral vectors. Of the various gene transfer methods, the retroviral vectors have the advantage of being an effective means of integrating the transgene into the genome of a recipient cell. But the limitation is that the retroviral vectors can only transfer small amount or the pieces of the DNA, that is approximately 8 kilo base pairs. So because of the constraint in the size, they may lack essential adjacent sequences for regulating the expression of the transgene. The maximum it can hold is 8 kilo base pair. So with this small size constraint, so essential sequences required for regulation of the expression of the transgene may not be possible to introduce a transgene with reference to a retroviral vector because it has a size constraint. So with this small size, you cannot introduce the sequences required for the regulation of the expression as well as the transgene. So this is an important limitation. If you carefully see the figure explains the method of establishing a transgene mice with retroviral vectors. Here the cleavage stage embryos, usually a 8-cell stage embryos, they are infected with a defective retrovirus carrying a transgene, and then the implanted females, that is the foster mothers, they give birth to transgenic pups, and the matings are carried out to determine which pups have the transgene in their germline cells. So from these founder transgenic animals, the transgenic lines can be established. So it's a method to establish a transgenic mice using retroviral vectors. The limitation, as I said, is with the size. The constraint is with the size. There is a further major drawback to the use of retroviral vectors. Although these vectors are designed to be replication defective, the genome of the retroviral vectors that is needed to create large quantity of the vector DNA can be integrated into the same nucleus as the transgene. So consequently, for applications in which either a commercial product is to be synthesized by the transgenic organism or the transgenic organism is to be used as food, it is absolutely necessary that there be no retroviral contamination. Though the vectors are designed to be replication defective, this is another major drawback. The genome of the retroviral strain, that is the helper virus, which is needed to create large quantities of the vector DNA, so they can be found integrated into the same nucleus as the transgene. So you will find the contamination of the retroviral genome, especially when the product is used as a food. So therefore, there is a need to look for alternative methods, that means alternative to retroviral vectors, and for this reason, because of smaller size, that is approximately 8 kilo base pair, not able to place the essential adjacent sequences for regulating the expression of the transgene, and contamination of the retroviral genome when the product is used as a food, the retroviral vectors are rarely used for creating the transgenic animals that have a commercial end use. So alternative to this, we have the DNA microinjection method. Because of the retroviral vector disadvantages, as mentioned in the previous slide. The micro-injection of DNA is the current method or preferred method for producing transgenic mice. So you can observe in the figure that it is about establishing transgenic mice by the DNA micro-injection. Here the eggs are obtained from donor females that have been induced to superovulate, and then they are mated with males. The purified samples of the transgene construct are micro-injected into the male pronucleus of a fertilized egg, and then implanted females, that is the foster mothers, they give birth to transgenic pups from which transgenic lines can be established. So in a sequence, the number of available fertilized eggs that are to be inoculated by microinjection is increased by stimulating donor females to superovulate. They are given an initial injection of pregnant mare's serum and another injection about 48 hours later of human chorionic gonadotrophin, and then a superovulated mouse produces about 35 eggs instead of the normal 5 to 10 eggs because of superovulation. Now these females are mated and then sacrificed. The fertilized eggs are flushed from their oviducts. The eggs are inoculated, that is usually immediately they are inoculated. The micro-injected transgene construct is often in a linear form. It is in a linear form and it is free of prokaryotic vector DNA sequences. So in case of mammals, after entry of the sperm into the egg, both the sperm nucleus, that is male pronucleus, and the female nucleus exist separately. And after the female nucleus completes its meiotic division to become a female pronucleus, the nuclear fusion can occur. We call it as karyogamy. And the male pronucleus, which tends to be larger than the female pronucleus, can be located, and these eggs can be maneuvered, oriented, and they are held in place while the DNA is micro injected. Right. Though the procedure is simple, it requires the coordination of number of experimental steps. Even with highly trained experts, the best percentage is only 5% that the inoculated eggs develop into live transgenic animals. So thus from 1000 inoculated fertilized eggs, about 30 to 50 transgenic pups are produced. So that is the efficiency of producing a transgenic mice by DNA micro-injection. None of the steps in this procedure is 100% efficient. It is not possible. Theoretically, it is not. Maybe theoretically it is possible, but practically it is not possible. Right? So this is about the transgenic mice production by DNA micro injection. So with this, I'll stop my discussion over here. We can continue our discussion in the next session and try to understand more about the production of transgenic animals. Thank you very much.